In 1880s Texas territory, where the wild frontier was ruled by whispers of gunfire, lonely hearts, and untold dangers, one widow dared to dream of a second chance. Rejected at the station and humiliated before strangers, her fate changed when a quiet, scarred rancher offered her not pity, but a place to belong. What follows is a tale of survival, love, and redemption that will keep you breathless. The steam hissed from the iron train as it slowed into Dry Creek Station. Dust swirled in the dry air, and townsfolk gathered out of habit, curious about who might step off into their quiet corner of the frontier. Out stepped Miriam O'Connell, a woman of 28, with striking auburn hair pulled into a neat braid, her face softened by deep blue eyes, touched with sorrow. Her widow's black gown clung to her slender figure. The hem, travel-worn, stood among the passengers, her gloved hand tightening around the small fingers of her 6-year-old son, Daniel, a boy with wavy chestnut brown hair and wide blue eyes, his cheeks flushed from the long journey. The boy's wide blue eyes darted between the strangers, staring back at them. Miriam bent down, whispering, "Remember, love, this is a new beginning for us." Her heart hammered against her ribcage. Letters written in neat script had promised her a husband, a home, and safety after years of scraping by as a widow. Dry Creek smelled of hot earth and possibility. She smoothed her travel-worn dress, determined to appear respectable despite the fatigue tugging at her bones. Daniel clutched his toy horse carved from pine, a gift from his late father. Miriam drew strength from the boy's trust. This had to work. She had risked everything, her savings, her pride, even her reputation, to come here. As she stepped off the platform, the crowd hushed. Curious eyes lingered a little too long, measuring the widow and her child. Miriam straightened her back, though uncertainty gnawed at her. Somewhere among them was the man who had written her all those hopeful words. She prayed he would see her worth beyond her worn shoes and the small boy at her side. She scanned the faces, searching for the man she had crossed states to meet. Samuel Turner, a prosperous rancher who had promised her stability. A tall man in a pressed gray suit pushed through the crowd, his slick hair gleaming under the sun. Samuel Turner, the name she had repeated in her head 100 times during the long journey. Miriam's pulse quickened. "Mrs. O'Connell," he asked, though his tone held none of the warmth of his letters. His eyes slid down her figure, pausing at the boy beside her. "Yes," Miriam said softly, offering a polite smile. "This is my son Daniel." A shadow crossed his face. His mouth curled into something cruel. "You never mentioned bringing baggage." The words cut sharper than a blade. Daniel's hand tightened in hers, sensing the sting, though he could not understand the insult. "I told you I was widowed," Miriam said, her cheeks burning as the crowd leaned in to listen. "Daniel is part of me." Turner scoffed. "I wanted a wife, not another man's child. And you're older than I expected. You'll not do," gasps rippled through the onlookers. Miriam's throat tightened, humiliation scorching her. She had crossed half the country, only to be cast aside like spoiled goods. Turner tipped his hat mockingly and turned his back. The crowd murmured, some with pity, others with smug satisfaction. Miriam stood frozen, her son pressed against her skirts, the weight of rejection pressing down like the desert sun. Her new beginning had ended before it began. The train whistle echoed behind her. The place she'd hoped for refuge had turned into a prison of humiliation. And yet, one pair of eyes lingered on her, not with scorn, but with quiet, yearning respect. From the edge of the platform, Caleb Hartman, the scarred rancher, watched. Miriam sank onto a bench at the edge of the station platform, her traveling trunk at her feet, and her dreams scattered around her like dust. Daniel leaned against her side, silent but watchful, his little face clouded with worry. She tried to hold her head high, though her hands trembled. "It's all right, darling," she whispered, brushing his hair back. "We'll think of something." But the words felt hollow. The train that had carried her hope was now puffing smoke in the distance, leaving her truly alone. No ticket to return, no money to spare, and no family waiting elsewhere. She had burned her bridges to take this chance. The townsfolk began to drift away, though not without lingering glances. A few women whispered behind their gloved hands. A group of men laughed outright. Miriam's cheeks burned hotter, but she forced herself to stay seated. Standing would only draw more eyes. Daniel tugged her sleeve. "Mama, where do we go now?" Her heart ached at the question. She wanted to answer with certainty, but all she had was fear. She pressed a kiss to his forehead. "Somewhere safe, my love. I promise." Behind them, unseen, a pair of eyes watched from the shadows of the livery stable. Eyes that did not mock or pity, but saw strength in the woman who refused to crumble, even as the world turned its back. Caleb Hartman, the quiet, scarred rancher, watched. Caleb Hartman stood apart from the townsfolk, his broad frame cloaked in a worn duster, hat shadowing half his face. A jagged scar ran from his temple to his jaw, an old injury from a cattle stampede, giving him a rugged, almost intimidating air. His steel blue eyes, however, were softened as they followed Miriam. He'd known rejection himself. Women turned away at the sight of his scar, though he carried a quiet strength that few cared to see. Caleb watched as Miriam led Daniel toward the station bench. Her shoulders squared, though her breath trembled. "Ma," Daniel whispered, "are we going back home?" His small voice cracked, trembling with confusion. Miriam knelt, smoothing the boy's hair. "No, sweetheart. Home is wherever we make it. And we'll make it." Together, Caleb stepped forward, boots crunching on gravel. Clearing his throat, he tipped his hat. "Ma'am," he said softly, "forgive me for overhearing. You've nowhere to stay?" Miriam's eyes flicked upward, wary yet polite. "Not anymore, it seems." He nodded once, solemn. "I've got a ranch outside town. Modest, but there's room for you and the boy, till you decide your next step." Her lips parted, surprise flickering across her face. She studied him, not missing the way townsfolk whispered at their exchange. A stranger offering help was no small thing here. "I couldn't impose," she began. "It's no imposition," Caleb replied, voice low but firm. "A woman and child shouldn't be left to the streets." For the first time since she stepped off the train, Miriam's heart eased, if only slightly. Perhaps kindness still existed, even in this barren land. By evening, Miriam and Daniel rode in Caleb's wagon. The town's chatter followed them like shadows. Dry Creek folk had long labeled Caleb the scarred hermit rancher, a man too quiet, too strange. As the wagon rattled over the dusty trail, Daniel leaned against his mother, eyes heavy with sleep. Miriam, watching the horizon, finally asked, "Why help us, Mr. Hartman?" Caleb's hands tightened on the reins. "Because I know what it feels like to be unwanted." The honesty in his tone silenced her. She glanced at him, noting the quiet dignity in his scarred features. He wasn't handsome in the polished way Samuel Turner was, but there was a steadiness about him, a strength that felt safer than she dared admit. They reached the ranch, a sturdy wooden house, fields stretching under the fading sun, horses grazing near the corral. Daniel's eyes lit up. "Mama, look! Horses!" Caleb allowed himself the faintest smile. "You can help me feed him tomorrow, son." Miriam blinked. "You called him son?" Caleb shrugged. "Seems to me he deserves to be called more than baggage, Her throat tightened. No man had spoken with such quiet respect since her husband's death. As night fell, Caleb carried Daniel inside, the boy asleep in his arms. Miriam followed, heart caught between gratitude and a dangerous spark of something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The kitchen smelled of cornbread and stew. Miriam sat at the wooden table, Daniel tucked against her side, while Caleb served with awkward care. His scarred hands fumbled slightly with the ladle, unused to company. "You didn't need to cook," Miriam said. "Can't let you go hungry," Caleb replied, sliding bowls toward them. His voice was gruff, but there was a warmth beneath it. Daniel slurped his stew happily. "This is real good, Mr. Hartman." Caleb's lips twitched in something close to a smile. "Glad you think so, Danny." Miriam tilted her head. "You're good with him." Caleb cleared his throat, eyes dropping to his bowl. "Never had children. But I reckon a boy deserves kindness. World's cruel enough." Silence stretched, filled by the crackle of the hearth. Miriam studied him in the firelight, the scar that once seemed fearsome now softened by shadow. "Mr. Hartman," she said gently, "you've given us more than kindness today. I'll find a way to repay it." He shook his head. "Don't. Just let me help. That's enough." Her chest tightened, a mix of gratitude and confusion. This man was nothing like Samuel Turner. Where Samuel had seen flaws, Caleb saw worth. Outside, the prairie wind howled against the windows. Inside, a fragile beginning took root. Morning broke with the smell of fresh hay and the distant whinny of horses. Miriam woke in the small room Caleb had given her. Simple, clean, and touched with care. Daniel had already darted outside, drawn by the animals. She found him at the corral, laughing as a young mare nudged his hand. Caleb stood nearby, hat low, watching with quiet pride. "He's fearless," Caleb remarked. "He's his father's son," Miriam answered softly, then quickly corrected. Was." Caleb nodded, respecting her silence. Loss was something he understood all too well. A few days later, Miriam ventured into Dust Creek with Daniel at her side. They needed flour, and she refused to live as though she were hiding. Still, her heart thumped with unease as they stepped into the general store. The bell above the door jingled, drawing every pair of eyes. Mrs. Tate, the shopkeeper's wife, pursed her lips as she whispered to another woman near the sugar barrels. "That's the widow Turner, turned away," one voice hissed. "And staying with Hartman of all people," the other replied, loud enough to sting. Miriam held her chin high, though her palms dampened inside her gloves. Daniel, sensing her tension, pressed closer against her skirts. She busied herself with selecting flour, but the whispers followed. Shameful. Desperate. Poor child. At the counter, Mr. Tate cleared his throat and counted out her change with deliberate slowness, as though weighing whether to hand it over. Miriam met his gaze, steady and unflinching, before taking the bag of flour. When she stepped back onto the sunlit street, the whispers clung to her like dust. She exhaled, trying to release their poison. Daniel tugged her sleeve. "Why do they talk like that, Mama?" "Because some folks forget kindness," she said, voice firm though her heart ached. "But we will not." Behind her, Caleb's shadow stretched across the road. He had followed quietly, making sure she wasn't alone. That evening, back at the ranch, Miriam rolled up her sleeves. "You've given us shelter, Mr. Hartman," she said, setting the flour on the table. "It's only fair I earn our keep." Caleb glanced up from mending a saddle strap, his scar catching firelight. "Ain't nothing owed." "Then consider it courtesy," Miriam replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. She fetched water from the well, started a stew with beans and potatoes, and scrubbed the cabin's table until it shone. Daniel swept the floor with a broom twice his size, his laughter filling the small space. Caleb watched in silence, but the heaviness in his cabin seemed to lift with every task she touched. The scent of stew filled the air, warm and rich. And for once, The cabin felt like a home instead of a holding place. When supper was served, Caleb bowed his head awkwardly, mumbling grace. Miriam caught the effort in it. The way he tried the words did not come easy. Later, as she mended a tear in his work shirt by the fire, Caleb finally spoke. "You're not afraid of work," Miriam smiled faintly. "Work is what's kept me alive." He studied her for a long moment, then gave a single nod. No more was said, but something had shifted. For the first time in years, Caleb's burdens felt just a little lighter, shared by hands that did not flinch. The fire crackled low, casting flickering shadows on the cabin walls. Miriam sat at the table, her hands folded, the day's work still clinging to her skin. Caleb sat across from her, sharpening a worn knife with deliberate strokes. For a long while, only the sound of steel on stone filled the air. Then Miriam spoke, her voice soft but steady. "My husband, David. He died of fever when Daniel was just a babe. We buried him under the oak by our farm. Everything else followed. Debts, hunger. The farm sold to strangers." Caleb's eyes lifted briefly. He did not speak, but the silence between them felt less like judgment and more like listening. After a pause, he said, "I know the way loss cuts." His hand brushed unconsciously at his scar. "A horse threw me when I was 17. Left me with this. Folks looked at me differently after. Like I was half a man." Miriam's gaze lingered on him, not with pity, but with recognition. "Scars don't make you less," she said firmly. For the first time, Caleb held her eyes. Something unspoken passed between them. Two people marked by pain, yet still standing. In town, however, whispers spread like wildfire, reaching Samuel Turner's ears. He smirked, sipping whiskey at the saloon. "So the widow thinks she can turn me down? She'll regret that. Ain't no woman makes a fool of me." Back at the ranch, Daniel tugged Miriam's sleeve. "Mama, can we stay here forever?" Miriam smiled faintly, but her heart twisted. She couldn't ignore the storm she felt brewing on the horizon. Caleb taught Daniel to brush the horses, guiding the boy's small hands. Laughter filled the air, easing Miriam's worries for the first time in months. "You're patient with him," Miriam noted, folding laundry on the porch. Caleb shrugged. "Animals taught me patience. Guess it works for children, too." Daniel's voice piped up. "Mr. Hartman, can I ride one day?" "Only if your ma says yes," Caleb replied. Miriam chuckled, shaking her head. "Perhaps when you're older." She caught Caleb's gaze, steady, warm, unspoken words lingering in the air. For a fleeting moment, her loneliness eased, but peace was fragile. A rider thundered past the ranch, dust trailing. He didn't stop, but Miriam's stomach knotted. She recognized the posture, the arrogant tilt of the hat. Samuel. Caleb noticed her expression darken. "Someone troubling you?" Miriam swallowed hard. Only the past refusing to stay buried. It was a Sunday when Samuel strode into Dry Creek's church, boots clicking against the wooden floor. Heads turned. His eyes searched and found Miriam seated beside Caleb and Daniel. She stiffened, Daniel instinctively holding her hand. Caleb shifted slightly, placing himself like a wall between them. "Well, well," Samuel drawled after service, approaching with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Seems you made yourself cozy quick." Miriam's chin lifted. "You made your choice, Samuel." Samuel leaned closer, his breath reeking of whiskey. "Don't think this town'll take kindly to you shacking up with Hartman. Folks will talk." "They already do," Caleb said evenly, stepping forward, voice low and dangerous. "Best you leave her be." Samuel's smirk deepened. "Or what? You'll fight me? One scar don't make you a man." Miriam's heart raced, but she stood tall. "I won't be bullied, Samuel." "Not by you," his eyes darkened. "We'll see." He tipped his hat mockingly and walked away. But the threat lingered like a storm cloud. That evening, Miriam sat on the porch, lantern light glowing against her features. Caleb joined her, arms crossed. "He won't stop," Caleb said quietly. I know, Miriam whispered, but I'm tired of running. Caleb turned, the fire in his eyes startling her. You don't have to face him alone. Not anymore. For a long moment, silence hung between them. The cicadas buzzed, the prairie wind carried the scent of sage. Miriam's gaze dropped to his scar, then back to his eyes. You deserve more than trouble, Caleb, she said softly. He shook his head. Maybe trouble's worth it, if it means protecting you. Her breath caught, warmth spreading through her chest. For the first time, she saw not just her rescuer, but a man who cared. Inside, Daniel's laughter echoed as he played with a wooden horse Caleb had carved for him. The sound was a balm against the darkness creeping closer. But in the distance, Samuel's shadow loomed, and trouble was coming. The morning sun spilled golden light over the ranch. Miriam carried a basket of freshly laundered clothes, the prairie wind tugging at her braid. She caught sight of Caleb chopping wood, muscles taut beneath his worn shirt. Daniel raced ahead, waving a carved wooden horse. Mama, look what Mr. Hartman made me. Miriam smiled, her heart warming. That's fine work, Daniel. Caleb paused, setting down the axe. Hope it's all right I gave it to him, he said, almost shy. It's more than all right, Miriam replied, her voice softer than she intended. You've given him joy he hasn't felt in years. Their eyes held, her blue meeting his stormy gray. The moment lingered, unspoken words hovering like fragile glass. I ain't much for talk, Caleb admitted, voice low, but I see strength in you, Miriam. More than most men would. Her breath caught, heat rising in her cheeks. You see me, Caleb, when no one else does. The air between them thickened with something dangerous and tender. Miriam looked away before the spark grew into fire, but the thought lingered long after she left. That evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, a hard knock rattled the ranch door. Caleb opened it to find a folded note pinned by a hunting knife. Miriam froze as Caleb read aloud, She was mine first. She will be mine again. Keep out, Scarface. Her stomach churned. Samuel's handwriting was unmistakable. Daniel peeked from the stairs, eyes wide. Mama, what does it mean? Miriam knelt, pulling him close. It means nothing you need to worry about, sweetheart. But her hands trembled as she held him. Caleb's jaw tightened, scar stark in the lantern glow. He's crossed a line. I'll speak to the sheriff tomorrow. Will that stop him? Miriam asked, voice breaking. Caleb's eyes darkened. If it doesn't, I will. His words were not loud, but they carried the weight of a promise, one that stirred both fear and safety in Miriam's heart. Later that night, Miriam couldn't sleep. The memory of Samuel's threats clawed at her mind. She found Caleb sitting by the fire, whittling a piece of wood, his presence steady and grounding. You should rest, he murmured without looking up. I can't, Miriam admitted. Every time I close my eyes, I see his face. Caleb set the carving down. His scarred hand reached across the table, pausing just before touching hers. Then look at mine instead. Let me be what you hold onto. Her chest ached with a mix of fear and longing. Slowly, she laid her hand over his. His grip was gentle, strong, grounding. I don't want to bring danger to your doorstep, she whispered. You didn't, Caleb said, firmly. The danger came looking, but I'll see it ended. For the first time, Miriam allowed herself to lean into the silence, into him. Firelight flickered against their faces, shadows dancing, hearts trembling on the edge of something new. The next day, Caleb rode into town, Miriam and Daniel in the wagon behind him. He intended to speak with Sheriff Dawson, but Samuel was waiting, leaning against the saloon with a smug grin. Well, well, Hartman, Samuel drawled. Playing family man now? Caleb ignored him, but Samuel stepped forward, blocking Miriam's path. His eyes gleamed as they swept over her. You belong with me, Miriam. Not hiding behind a scarred brute, Daniel clung to her skirts, fear in his amber eyes. Miriam's voice shook, but she stood tall. I don't belong to you, Samuel. I never did. Samuel's smile vanished. His hand shot out, gripping her wrist. "Careful, widow. You think Hartman can protect you forever?" Before Miriam could answer, Caleb's fist collided with Samuel's jaw, sending him sprawling into the dirt. The crowd gasped. Samuel wiped blood from his lip, laughing darkly. "This ain't over. Not by a long shot." And as he staggered to his feet, Miriam knew the battle had only just begun. Sheriff Dawson leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowed as Caleb stood before him. Miriam and Daniel waited anxiously by the door. "You say Turner threatened her with a knife at your place?" the sheriff asked. "Left a note," Caleb confirmed, voice tight. "And today, he laid hands on her." The sheriff sighed. "Samuel's family's got money. They'll fight tooth and nail if I drag him in." But his gaze shifted to Miriam. "If he comes near you again, you let me know. I'll keep eyes on him." Outside, Miriam exhaled shakily. "So that's it? A warning?" Caleb placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "He'll answer for what he's done." One way or another, Daniel tugged at Caleb's coat. "Mr. Hartman, don't let him take Mama." Caleb knelt, meeting the boy's fearful eyes. "He won't, Danny. Not while I draw breath." Miriam's heart twisted. Caleb wasn't just protecting her. He was protecting her son. And that meant more than words could hold. Back at the ranch, life tried to carry on. Miriam baked bread in the small kitchen, Daniel played outside with the wooden horse, and Caleb repaired a broken fence. That evening, as stars blanketed the sky, Miriam joined Caleb on the porch. The night was still, but her thoughts weren't. "You risked yourself for us," she murmured. Caleb kept his eyes on the horizon. "I'd do it again." Her hand brushed against his on the railing. "I don't know what fate has in store, but you've given me more peace than I thought possible." Caleb turned, his scar stark in moonlight, but his gaze gentle. "Peace isn't enough. You deserve happiness, Miriam." Her chest tightened. For the first time since her husband's death, she allowed herself to dream of something beyond survival. Inside, Daniel's soft snores carried through the open window. Outside, two hearts edged dangerously close to crossing a line neither expected. The peace shattered 3 nights later. Flames licked the dark sky, sparks flying, as shouts rang across the pasture. "Caleb!" Miriam cried, rushing onto the porch. "The barn! I see it!" Caleb barked, grabbing a bucket. He sprinted into the blaze, Daniel clinging to Miriam's skirts. Together, they fought the fire. Caleb hauling water, Miriam soaking blankets to smother the flames. Daniel coughed from the smoke, tears streaking his cheeks. "This wasn't no accident," he said grimly. "Samuel lit it." Miriam's hands shook as she pulled Daniel close. "How much more can he take from us?" Caleb touched her cheek gently, his thumb brushing soot away. "Nothing. Not while I've got you here." The intimacy of his words stunned her. Even in ruin, a fragile thread of hope held fast between them. The barn fire was still smoldering when Sheriff Dawson rode up with 2 deputies. Samuel Turner wasn't hard to find. He was at the saloon, boasting drunkenly about how he'd teach Hartman a lesson. The sheriff slammed him against the bar, cuffs snapping around his wrists. "Samuel Turner, you're under arrest for arson, assault, and terrorizing this family." "You got no proof!" Samuel spat, struggling. The sheriff tossed the burned knife handle onto the counter, the same one Samuel had used to pin his threat. "This says otherwise. And half the town saw you lay hands on the widow. You'll answer for every bit of it." The saloon erupted in murmurs. For the first time, Samuel's smug grin faltered. Back at the ranch, Dawson delivered the news. "He'll stand trial. Damage will be paid out from his daddy's estate. That man won't trouble you again." Miriam's knees nearly buckled with relief. Caleb steadied her, his scarred hands warm against her back. Daniel beamed. "Mama, does this mean we're safe?" Miriam knelt. "Yes, sweetheart, we're safe now." But as she looked up at Caleb, she knew safety wasn't the only thing she'd found. She had found a partner, solid, steadfast, and true. By dawn, the barn stood charred but standing. Exhausted, soot streaked across his face. Caleb caught Miriam's gaze. 2 days after the fire, Miriam found Caleb in the stable, tending to the horses with bandaged hands. "You should rest," she said softly. He glanced at her, a wry smile ghosting his lips. "Can't. Animals don't wait." She stepped closer, hesitating before reaching for his hand. Her fingers traced the rough bandages. "You've given more than anyone ever has for me and Daniel." "Why?" Blue eyes burned into hers. "Because you're worth it. Both of you." Her breath caught. "I was cast aside, Caleb. Left humiliated. How can you see me as anything more?" "Because I don't see what you lost," he said, voice low, raw. "I see what you are. Strong, fierce, beautiful." The words stole her defenses. For the first time, she let her hand rest in his without pulling away. And though no kiss came, the air between them was charged with unspoken promises, fragile yet undeniable. Dust Creek's annual harvest dance transformed the town. Lanterns hung from the rafters of the barn, their warm glow spilling across hay bales, and worn floorboards polished smooth by boots. Fiddles struck up lively reels, the music carrying over laughter and chatter. Miriam stood at the edge, her dress plain but clean, her hair pinned with care. She felt the weight of eyes on her, some sympathetic and greeted with nods, warm smiles, and quiet respect. Others sharp with judgment. Then Caleb entered. His frame filled the doorway, shoulders broad beneath his Sunday shirt, scar catching the lantern light. The room hushed, just a breath, as if acknowledging his presence. He walked straight to Miriam, no hesitation, no glance at the watching crowd. Holding out his hand, he asked, "Dance with me?" Her heart stumbled. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. His palm was rough, warm, and steady. Together they stepped onto the floor, the fiddle striking a gentler tune. As they moved, Miriam felt the whispers fall away. Silas's gaze anchored her, quiet and sure, until all she saw was him. For the first time since arriving in Dust Creek, she felt not out of place but chosen. Weeks after the dance, the first snowfall dusted Dust Creek in white, softening every edge. Miriam no longer carried her burdens alone. She stood outside Caleb's cabin. No, their cabin now, watching her son build clumsy snowmen, while Caleb guided him with patient hands. Daniel tugged at Caleb's sleeve. "Mr. Hartman, can I call you Pa now?" The question stunned them both. Caleb knelt, emotion tightening his voice. "If that's what you want, Danny, I'd be proud." Miriam's breath caught, tears brimming as Daniel hugged him fiercely. Inside, a fire crackled. The air smelled of pine and smoke, of home. Miriam turned to Caleb, heart steady. "When I came here, I thought I'd been cast aside, that I was too much of a burden for anyone to want. But you..." She faltered, then found her strength. "You've shown me I'm not broken. I'm not unwanted. You've given me back my life." Caleb's scarred face softened, emotion flickering raw in his eyes. He stepped closer, his hand finding hers. "You've given me something too. A place. A family. Hope I never dared ask." For the world hushed around them. The snow falling. Daniel laughing in the distance, as Caleb bent his head, brushing his lips against hers. It was a kiss of promise, of healing, of second chances. Into it, her heart finally at rest. The whispers of Dust Creek no longer mattered. She had found her home, not in letters or promises, but in the quiet strength of the man beside her. And for the first time in years, she knew she was exactly where she belonged. From rejection to redemption, Miriam and Caleb found more than survival. They found each other. But love on the frontier was never simple. Would you fight for the one who gave you a home? If you were captivated by this tale, make sure to subscribe, like, and share, because more unforgettable love stories from history are waiting for you here.